I know you're running a successful business and you never think that it's possible that you could become a target of a government investigation. Sadly, our government, as it grows bigger, it goes after more and more people that may or may not have had criminal intentions. If somehow you come into the crosshairs of government, a lot of things can happen. And today we're seeing a lot in the news about Rudy Giuliani. Now, the irony is that Rudy Giuliani used to be one of the most well-respected law enforcement officers in the country. He was the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York. And the Southern District of New York, frequently referred to as the Sovereign District of New York, is almost independent of the Department of Justice. It is so powerful. Why? Because it's in the financial center of the universe. It's in New York City. And while he was there, he was really built a name for himself, going after mafia chieftains and Wall Street people. He went after Michael Milken, Ivan Boesky during the 1980s. This was right around the time that my own 26-year journey through the federal prison system began. So I became familiar with him as an individual. And I think that you, as a business owner or as somebody who views himself as being beyond the reach, beyond reproach of government, here we have one of the most powerful law enforcement officers in the history of the United States recently was subject to a government investigation where a team of federal agents went to his home in New York City. Dozens of them pounded on the door, woke him up, and went through all of his personal belongings and seized quite a bit of evidence. Now, we don't know what's going to happen. I haven't seen any indictments. I have not seen any of the judicial court filings. But here's what we know, is that this happened because the government began investigating somebody else. And when they were investigating somebody else, they found records that led them to some kind of way persuade a magistrate judge that there is cause to believe that a federal crime has been committed. And because they've persuaded a federal judge to believe that a crime has been committed, we have to kind of anticipate what's going to follow. Well, right now we know that prosecutors are sifting through probably thousands or tens of thousands of electronic records. Every email, every note, every document, every file and folder, and they've got really sophisticated software, the investigators do, that are going to be looking for keywords, looking for people that sent or received emails, looking for all types of information that they can use to build a case. And when they gather enough evidence, those prosecutors, the next step that they are going to take is they're going to impanel a grand jury. Now, what's a grand jury? A grand jury is just a body of citizens. Frequently think of the types of people that are going to respond and to sit on a grand jury are going to be nurses and firemen and postal workers and people that cannot conceive of this concept of United States of America versus somebody's last name. So to think that they're going to be unbiased is absurd. The reality is that when somebody is sitting on a grand jury, they're going to be sitting inside of a room with a one-sided view. And that one side is going to be from a United States attorney who's going to be calling witnesses without a defense attorney and just presenting information. So whatever is on these hard drives, that's what people in the grand jury are going to hear. Then the prosecutors may also call bankers and talk about funds that came in. They may call upon, innocent parties and have them come and explain the nature of what happened here. But when the prosecutors ask their questions, they're going to ask those questions in the manner that is most unfavorable to the target of the investigation. And when somebody impanels a grand jury, when a U.S. attorney impanels a grand jury, what they are seeking is an indictment. An indictment is a criminal charge in the federal judicial system. And typically, the type of case that Mr. Giuliani would be involved with as a target of a government investigation would be something that has to do with honesty or deception, or the lack of honesty and deception, or something that's hiding a trail of evidence. So there are so many laws on the federal books that anybody could be subject to one of these inquiries. But Giuliani's particularly vulnerable because the allegation might be that he influenced a federal election. And although he says that he did not lobby anyone, it's really not relevant what he says. What's relevant are what do those postal inspectors, firemen, and nurses that are sitting on a grand jury, what are they hearing? What evidence is coming before them? Giuliani's words are not going to have any weight at all, but the U.S. attorney's words are going to have a tremendous amount of weight. And again, there's not going to be a defense attorney arguing the other side. This is strictly to determine, through what's called a preponderance of the evidence, of whether Giuliani participated in a crime. And I don't know what kind of crime they're looking at. It could be obstruction of justice, which simply means I am hiding information from investigators. It could be a violation of the federal election laws or the lobbying laws. We recently worked with a young man who was a campaign he raised funding for both Republicans and for Democrats. But he fell under the crosshairs of government because he did not register as a lobbyist. And as a result of millions of dollars being raised, he is now on his way to prison to serve a 12-year sentence. These are very serious crimes. And Giuliani, no doubt, regardless of the strong face he may put on when he gets on television, he understands the danger, the quicksand he is in. And regardless of what he says, you can be sure that there are prosecutors right now in New York City that are trying to figure out how their career can advance by taking a man like Giuliani and turning him into a criminal defendant. That becomes a trophy. That trophy a prosecutor can use to advance his career. We've all got to be thinking about how this will play out. And this will play out with, first of all, they're going to search through all of that evidence. Whatever's on there, every email, every text message, every contract, every written document, every folder, all of that will be subject to prying government eyes. And those prying government eyes will be striving to build a case. They'll be striving to poison the grand jury against Giuliani. They will be striving to build a case that brings so much pressure on Giuliani that he may testify against somebody more powerful than him. And we all know who that may be. And the question becomes, does Giuliani have such loyalty to people that he may or may not know or he can serve up? Or does he try to save himself at 70 years of age? And every individual has to make that case on their own. In most cases, the individual realizes that he has a responsibility to his children and to his wife and to his family. And I never make a judgment call on what anybody does. But there's no doubt in my mind that right now, Giuliani is having some difficult evenings because he knows the statistics. And those statistics are that when prosecutors persuade a federal judge that a crime has been committed, that's kind of a heavy lift. And if a judge signs that order and they allow the FBI or the investigators to go into his home and gather evidence, they pretty much know what they're going to find because that evidence already exists on another computer that they've already searched. So they already know the emails exist. They already know the contracts exist. They got them from someplace else. Let me give you an example. We once had a client who was a nurse, and she suspected that her husband was having an affair with somebody else. And she wanted to find out, but she didn't know how, so she wanted to search his email. And she hired a group of people that said they could find emails. And she hired them, paid them like $3,000 or $4,000. Well, this company had outsourced some of their work to people in Chechnya and Russia and all kinds of other places. And somehow those people got in trouble. And when they got in trouble, the investigators seized all of their computers. And on those computers, they found every one of their clients that they were using to hack email addresses. And they found this nurse. And all this nurse was trying to do to find out if her husband was cheating on her. But it cost her millions of dollars. Why? Because she used to earn about $150,000 a year as a nurse. Now she's a felon and she has lost her nursing license Besides that, she went to prison for 2 years. So you see, investigations begin in a number of ways. Giuliani may say there's nothing on my computer, but if he sent an email or somebody sent him an email, the government already knows. So when they went into his home, they knew that those records existed. And now they're looking for corroborating evidence. So when they build a case to the grand jury, they can show what happened. What happens next? The grand jury returns an indictment. When the grand jury returns an indictment, the chances of a sentencing hearing follow are extremely high because the federal government really has a success rate in getting sentenced. So bottom line is, what should Giuliani be doing right now? Well, he'd better be thinking about a mitigation strategy. He'd better be thinking about what can he do to influence potentially a judge. And every individual is different. I can tell you there's another really high-profile guy that's right in the news regarding these government investigations. It's the congressman from Florida, I forgot, Matt Gaetz, right? How did he get trapped into a government investigation? Well, somebody else got caught doing something wrong. Of course, that guy has his liberty at stake, and rather than expose himself to the difficulty of a 7-year, 8-year, 10-year, 15-year prison sentence, he agrees to plead guilty, cooperate with authorities in exchange for getting a cooperation agreement. And that cooperation agreement results in him potentially getting a lower sentence. It's not guaranteed, but it's potential. The reality, when somebody comes into the crosshairs of government, they expose themselves to a series of cascading problems. And for that reason, we really encourage people, don't think you're immune from this. Don't think that just because everything's going great in your life right now, everything in your life cannot fall apart in an instant. For these reasons, we highly encourage people to begin thinking about mitigation strategies long before they come into the crosshairs of the government. The more a person knows about the system, the more a person is going to be able to make better decisions at every stage in the journey, hopefully avoiding problems with the government investigation. I recently talked to a very successful business guy, and he said, I will never send an email again. Why not? Because emails are always discoverable, and those discoverable emails can come back to haunt somebody. Not because they had any malintentions, but simply because the way that evidence is collected and the way that evidence is distributed to a grand jury, it can result in something really severe. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. You can follow the news yourself and see what's going on with the Rudy Giuliani case, but I would not be surprised to get a phone call from his team talking about what can we do to improve mitigation efforts for this individual. And it's a heavy lift. That's not a boilerplate answer. Every individual has a story. Every individual has something to offer. Our team strives to help, but one way I'm going to help you right now is research yourself. Do your own research. Not research yourself, but do your own research of what goes on. What can you do to protect yourself? How do you develop best practices? Think that succeeding through this kind of process really follows the same principles that we always teach. Number 1, define success and document a strategy. Number 2, put priorities in place. Number 3, develop your tools, tactics, and resources to succeed. Number 4, execute your plan every single day. And 5, make sure you hold yourself accountable. Regardless of what stage in the journey you're in, those 5 points of action should define what you're doing. It's the way that you can preserve your liberty, preserve your assets, and hopefully bring you a higher peace of mind. I am Michael Santos with Prison Professors, and I want to thank you for being a part of our community.